Hello class, hope you're doing well. This is the PowerPoint for Chapter 1 and the title is Introduction. So we're going to go over this together, and again, the PowerPoints are not a substitute for reading the chapters, so make sure you read the chapters each week. They have a lot more detailed information about stuff that you need to know. So the PowerPoints, which we'll be doing each week, are just supplemental information. So again, this is just our introduction of Chapter 1 PowerPoint. And again, if you have questions after this, you can put them on the discussion board or you can email me. Okay? So without further ado, let's look at this Chapter 1. There's a lot of questions in this chapter that I'm going to be asking you to answer. And you can think about your answers because some of these answers may come into play when you have a pop quiz or you have a position paper that's going to be due. Okay? So, first question. Does race matter in America? This is one of the questions that's posed in the chapter. And again, no matter what race you are, does it matter in the United States? So think about that for a minute. And if it does matter, why? Why does it matter to you? Or why not? Does race matter in America? We're going to be talking about race a lot in this class, especially when it comes to the community and criminal justice. So that's the first question I'm going to pose to you to think about. Second question is going to be, the U.S. is a melting pot. Is that true or false? A melting pot. Have you heard that term before? What does that mean to you? It means a whole bunch of different crayons are melted down into one wax. That's one color. Are we a melting pot? Are we that melting pot? Taking all the ethnicities that we have? Or are we all separate? So again, those are two questions that will pose to you that you need to think about. And there's no wrong answers for these, okay? Those are just for our discussion, for you to think about. You may see these again. Again, the chapter, this introduction chapter, talks a lot about the society that we live in. And we live in either A or B society. So you need to decide which we live in. Is it a homogeneous society? And homogeneous is of the same or similar kind or nature. Or do we live in a heterogeneous, made up of people that are not alike? So it's almost very similar to the first question. Okay? Which society do we live in? What do you think? Are we all kind of similar? Or are we made up of people that are not similar, that are not alike? Okay, just a couple questions for you. Now, when you answer those questions, which is better for society? The homogeneous or the heterogeneous? What do you think? Is it better to have a bunch of people with different opinions or everybody that has the same opinions? Think about those answers for you and how you would answer that. Or you may pose these questions to family or friends and see what they say. You may get some different answers. Again, no incorrect answers, just information. Okay, moving on here. We're going to do some definitions. We'll constantly be doing definitions throughout these chapters. First of all, per the book, the definition of race is a group, especially of people with particular similar physical characteristics who are considered as belonging to the same type or the fact of belonging to a group. So again, that's the definition per the book of race. Physical characteristics, as opposed to ethnicity, which is different, which is a collection of individuals and organizations identified by national origin, cultural distinctiveness, racial characteristics, or religious affiliation. So your race is different than your ethnicity. So think about what race you are. What race do you belong to? Do you have one? can it be defined? And then again, what's your ethnicity? What national origin do you have? What cultural characteristics do you have, or religious affiliations? So again, race and ethnicity are different, so make sure you understand these differences. And the book does a good job about talking about these things, as well as some examples. Okay, talking about a minority group of people. Number one, there's distinguishing physical or cultural traits. Unequal treatment by those in power. So the minority group is a smaller group that does not have power. Okay, it's very distinctive there. There's involuntary membership in the group. In other words, you don't voluntarily go to the group, you're just involuntary as a member. And there's group solidarity. There's in-group marriage. So when we look at a minority group, these are some of the characteristics that make up a minority group. Minority is not bad, it just has some connotations which the book talks about. And these are some of them. Types of minority groups. So remember, those are the definitions. Now we're going to look at different types of minority groups that are out there. Racial groups, ethnic groups, remember we went over those definitions, religious groups, and gender groups. Are there others? What do you think? So these 4 types of groups. Now we look at the subordinate groups. Subordinate means under or below. So how are these subordinate groups created from our communities? First of all, migration. Do you know what migration means? Is it different from immigration? So migration means people coming to one place from another. It can be voluntary or involuntary. Annexation is another subordinate group, adding to something larger, especially the incorporation of a new territory into the domain of a city, country, or state. What's an example of an annexation of people? What do you think an example of that would be? A group of people that are going to a different country, state, or city and becoming a group in that area. Annexation. Colonization. The action or process of settling among the establishing control over the indigenous people of an area. Colonization. So that means basically taking over an area and establishing control over some people, native people that are already there. Colonization. What example could you give for colonization? Did Christopher Columbus discover America? Or did Christopher Columbus come here, discover a bunch of Native Americans living here, and basically took control over the Native Americans and settled Americans here? So again, colonization, a few different examples that you can give. Okay, that might be one. Indigenous means the poor people or the native people that are subordinate. That's what indigenous means. Consequences of subordinate group status. So some of the things that can happen because of the status of being a subordinate group. Here are some examples. Extermination. Does anything come to mind about extermination of a group, of a subordinate group? Maybe World War II with the Nazis and the Jews. Might want to read up on that. Talk about extermination of a people, of a subordinate group. Horrible event that occurred. Expulsion. Australia is a very good example because Australia began as a penal colony because that's where England sent their prisoners to be expelled to Australia. So thus Australia began as a penal colony and grew into its own country as well as continent. Secession, departing and creating their own society. cult or splinter groups. And again, these are groups that leave normal everyday society to create their own groups, sometimes called cults. Splinter groups can be political, can be religious, can be a lot of things. So these are the consequences of subordinate group statuses. Segregation, we know what that is. Again, there's a lot of segregation of a lot of different things, whether it's religion, race, culture. Cultural fusion means a coming together of people, fusing together, and the book talks about that as being multiculturalism. So again, when you have cultural fusion, people coming together from different areas, different societies, different religions, different cultures, different people, it's called multiculturalism. And apparently that's a good thing, as we've seen. Assimilation, process by which the subordinate group takes on the characteristics of the dominant group and is eventually accepted as part of the group. So to assimilate, to become one, you take on the norms and values of that new group and you become that one of the group. So it's very similar to the melting pot of the United States, where people assimilate into the United States and they become an American citizen. A lot of different issues with that though, but assimilation can be had if you do those things. Racism, per the book, is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group. We'll be talking about this because a lot of issues have occurred, especially with police and corrections and law enforcement and the courts when it comes to racism. And we'll talk about that. We'll continue to talk about that, especially with the community issues that have come up with racism. Have you ever experienced racism, no matter what race you are? Many people have, unfortunately. Prejudice and discrimination. One is an attitude, the other is behavioral. Which one do you think is which? Is being prejudiced, is that an attitude? Or is that behavior? Discrimination is behavioral. If you discriminate against somebody, you're doing something against them. If you're prejudiced, you just don't like somebody because of their religious context or their ethnicity. Very powerful words though, and we'll continue to talk about these things. Ethnocentric, the tendency to judge other cultures by the standards of our own, thinking that ours is superior. So if you're ethnocentric, basically you think that your culture, your race, is the only way. Where we'll be having some discussions about the Ku Klux Klan coming up pretty soon in chapter 3. And they're a very ethnocentric group. They judge other groups, non-whites, by the standards of their own, thinking that theirs is superior. And the famous line from the KKK is that they don't hate other races. They just love the white race. So we'll have a balanced discussion about the KKK, and you can decide where you stand on ethnocentric groups. So list 3 reasons why multiculturalism is bad. Fusion, why that's bad. Let's see if we can come up with some here. It divides people. It fosters discrimination because of the division of different people. And it prevents equality. So though the book talks about this in this chapter, they go into very great detail about the reasons why multiculturalism is bad. Okay? On balance, because that's what we do in this class, we balance everything out and then you decide what you think is right or wrong and how you want to improve it. How about looking at 5 reasons why multiculturalism is good? Why do you think it's good? You have any reasons? It dispels poor assumptions, meaning that people think that one race is bad or they smell or they're not smart or whatever. But once you have this multiculturalism that goes on, you see the people. So again, it may be a wrong assumption or a poor assumption about a person until you get to know them. It promotes dialogue. If you don't talk to people, you don't know what they're all about. And a lot of people fear other races and cultures and religions because they don't know anything about it. So that's why talking to people that are different than you is good. That's why if you go into law enforcement courts or corrections, you need to talk and you need to be able to identify issues and talk about them. So dialogue is paramount. It increases access to ideas. Once you have a dialogue, you have different ideas. Different people come together, have different ideas. Very successful. So the more people you have, the more ideas you have. Because your idea may be good, but there may be a better idea out there that you can share with somebody. It's a good economic move. When you have multiculturalism, you have a bunch of different people that do different things, especially in the employment sector. Because not everybody's a cop, not everybody's a teacher, not everybody is a electrician. But when you have different people from different cultures doing different things because of their skill level, it's good for the economy. Finally, it's a good national security move. So the book talks about this a little bit. And again, I was in the military for 4 years, 10 months, and 5 days in the United States Air Force. And in the military, it doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, what culture, religion, everybody's there to do one job. And everybody was there when I was in the military, and there was no issues, there was no racism, no discrimination, because everybody was there to do the work of the government to provide security. So when it says it's a good national security move, I believe that because I saw it. So again, being in the military is a little different because there's very little discrimination that I saw or racism because everybody's there to do one job. So I found that statement to be true. Okay, you may know some people in the military, and you may want to ask them, is it a good security move? Okay, we're almost done here. Question: why has race become such a focal point of the discussion of groups in the United States? Why do you think? Think about that for a second. Why has race become such a focal point of the discussion of groups in the United States? Have you been listening to the news? Do you get your Twitter feed? Do you go online? How do you get information? How do you know this is happening or not happening? And what are the issues? Number 2, what is the difference between patriotism and ethnocentrism? We went over what ethnocentrism is, but what's patriotism? Can you be a patriot and be a racist? Or can you be ethnocentrist and be a racist? So those are 2 questions for you to think about. Patriotism and ethnocentrism. Okay, that concludes chapter 1 and this PowerPoint presentation. Again, if you have questions, you can post them on the discussion board for others, or you can email me directly. And again, make sure you do the reading. This is a good chapter to start out with. And next week, we're going to be going over chapter 2, and we'll have a movie for you. So again, make sure you look at the definitions that were included in the class a couple days ago. And again, any questions, please let me know. Thanks, and have a great day.